This is CJ Baker, and every day I've been reviewing a different randomly generated album that appears in the book, 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. And I just finished my 28th day of doing so. So, being my fourth week, just like I did in previous weeks, I'm now going to do a weekly recap. So, basically, it'll be a compilation of the reviews that I previously posted. So, with the exception of Pink Floyd, The Wall, which was such a mammoth album, there was no way I was going to edit it down to a 3-minute review. All the other reviews were 3-minute shorts. So in some cases, there's going to be some extended bonus footage as well. Then at the end of the video, I'm going to give my observations of how this week went, and I'm going to share my updated rankings. So if you want me to keep making this content, please like and subscribe, and hope you enjoy. So today's randomly generated album is Pink Moon by Nick Drake, released in 1972. And Nick Drake was somewhat of a tragic figure. He died at the age of 26 in 1974. And at the time, no one really knew who he was. And his music basically commercially just wasn't that successful. It wasn't until decades later that he started to receive some attention. Like there was artists that were citing him as an influence. And the title track and opening track of this album, Pink Moon, received some mainstream attention because it was used in a car commercial. And that's how I was introduced to the song Pink Moon. I remember hearing it like on the commercial. But yeah, you can definitely hear how he would go on to be influential. Like you think of the indie single songwriter movement of like the mid to late 90s to the 2000s, and you think of like the artists like Elliott Smith and Neutral Mercantile and other similar type artists that had that lo-fi indie sound, you can hear how that was very much a template laid out by Nick Drake. So Nick Drake, if anything, I would say he sounded ahead of his time. And I do love this album. We already mentioned Pink Moon, absolutely gorgeous tune. And I just love the lo-fi, emotional intimacy of the album. So it's just the type of album that I connect with on a personal level. And I could really just read off every single, all 11 tracks on the album because there's nothing I would consider fill. And it's basically 11 songs in 27 minutes. So it's like the perfect length. It just breezes by. But a couple of the songs that I especially love on the album is Place to Be, Which Will, and I love Parasite as well. But yeah, that's like the entire album. And it's, you can, like I said, you can see the influence there. Like I said, but it's just sad that he didn't receive his flowers when he was still alive. But yeah, I love the album. I give it 5 stars. So today's randomly generated album is I Should Coco by Supergrass, released in 1995. So we got some Britpop, and the album starts off really strong with the first 4 tracks. We got I Like to Know, which is really infectious with some sing-along la la la's. Then Caught by the Fuzz, which is a chaotic banger. Then there's Men's Size Rooster, which is also really catchy. And then there's the best song on the album, All Right, which is very sunny and just has a really good, feel good vibe. But then after those first 4 songs, it does start to lag a bit. Like the album is definitely top heavy. Like my favorite 4 tracks are the first 4 tracks on the album. But there's still all some strong songs. Like Lenny's a very solid tune. I really like Strange Ones. But there's also a couple songs that I'm just not too keen on. Like one of the songs, We're Not Supposed to. It has some chipmunk-esque vocals. So it's just on the edge of being full-on hardcore chipmunk. And you never want to go full-on hardcore chipmunk. So it's one of those songs I'm not sure if it's amusing or annoying. And the other track I'm not quite sure about is Sofa of my lethargy, so like lethargic. And that's actually my problem with the song. So maybe the song's doing what it should. It is kind of lethargic. It does meander a bit. It's a little bit long. It would be better if they cut it in half. So yeah, those two songs I'm not too keen on. I guess the other song I like that I forgot to mention is Time. That has like a really good classic feel to it as well. So yeah, overall, still a really solid album. I enjoyed listening to it and I'll give it 4 stars. Today's randomly generated album is Odelay by Beck, released in 1996. And I love Beck, and I love this album. And this is an album that I experienced in real time. So every time I listen to it, there's also a nostalgic bump as well. So a number of songs on the album were produced by the Dust Brothers, and I'm also a fan of the work of the Dust Brothers as well. Like, for example, they notably produced Paul's Boutique by the Beastie Boys, and I love that album. And one thing that the Dust Brothers do well is their inventive use of samples. So that's definitely the case with Paul's Boutique, which this album obviously it doesn't live up to Paul's Boutique in terms of use of samples, because that's a whole nother level of sampling, but it's still effective and inventive use of sampling. But yeah, it's also a very eclectic album of many different musical elements. Like as you would expect with a Beck album, there's the folky single songwriter type tunes with songs like Lord Only Knows, Jackass, Ramshackle. Yeah, I love all those songs, but I definitely love Ramshackle. Gorgeous tune, very melancholic. But there's other different elements as well. Like, for example, on a song like Minus, you got some punky elements, both punky and grungy elements. On a song like Derelict, you even got some Middle Eastern elements. And then, of course, with the involvement of the Dust Brothers, there's a number of different hip hop elements throughout the album as well. But yeah, there's also, like, I love every song on the album, but there's a couple of classic back tunes like New Pollution. Love that song, all time banger. And then there's also the all time classic banger, Where It's At. So we got 2 turntables and a microphone. That was a good drum break. Bottle and cans, just clap your hands. But yeah, I love that song. And that song, I talked about diverse musical elements. You basically got those eclectic elements all in one song with Where It's At. Like you even got like a lot of like the different jazzy elements. And that's also an example of inventive use of sampling. That's an all-time Beck song and an all-time jam for sure. But yeah, I basically love the entire album, all cure, no fill. Like a couple other songs I didn't mention, Art Rocks. I love me some Novocaine, the song. And yeah, just basically the entire album, all cure, no fill. So I give this album 5 stars. So today's randomly generated album is Oracular Spectacular by the indie pop duo MGMT. And prior to listening to this album, I was familiar with 3 of the songs, so the 3 singles, the 3 hits. So Time to Pretend, Electric Feel, and Kids. And Time to Pretend, it was okay, like it was a decent song. But the other 2, Electric Feel and Kids, were legit certified bangers, especially Electric Feel. Oh, I said, ooh, girl, shock me like electric eel. So yeah, I was familiar with those 3 songs. And like I said, 2 of them I thought were legit bangers, but for whatever reason, I just never got around to listening to the entire album until now. So what I will say is the best 2 songs on the album were the 2 I already mentioned, Electric Feel and Kids. But there were some other good songs on the album. They used a decent track. I also like Fourth Dimensional Transition. That song was kind of trippy, and a lot of songs had a bit of like a psychedelic feel. And then the other song that I kind of like was Pieces of What. As far as the other songs go, they were just okay. There was nothing on the album that I hate. So yeah, it was called Oracular Spectacular. That's probably more like Oracular Good. but good is good. So, like I said, it's still a decent album. I still enjoyed it. So, I'll give the album 4 stars. Today's randomly generated album is Raw Like Sushi, released in 1989 by Neneh Cherry. And I'm not necessarily a big Neneh Cherry fan, but she has done some stuff that I like. Like, for example, she has a song with the Gorillas, Kids with Guns, which is a really good song. I like the song 7 Seconds that she does with Yusio and Dill. Sophie, I pronounced his name right. And then also, I did happen to listen to a 2018 album, Broken Politics, and that was a pretty solid album. But putting all that aside, we're now going to focus on this album. Do I like this album? That's the question. So this is a debut album. There was 3 songs I was already familiar with. Buffalo Stance, which was kind of the big hit from the album, Manchild, and Kisses on the Rid. So basically, all 3 of those songs I do remember receiving some radio rotation, and I remember them getting played on Much Music for my non-Canadian viewers. Basically, Canadian MTV back when they both played music videos. So those 3 songs happen to be the first 3 songs on the album. So Buffalo Stance. It is kind of catchy, but I do find some of the lyrics cringy. The music arrangement is extremely dated, and I'm not particularly a fan of the rapping. I find that Neneh Cherry is a better vocalist than rapper. We'll get to the second song, Manchild. This song I like a lot better. Like it has like a really cool trip hop arrangement, so it doesn't sound as dated. But once again, I do have some issues with cringy lyrics and the rapping. And then the next song, Kisses on the Red. It also sounds a bit dated, but I don't hate the song. And then the other song I want to mention is the 4th song, because that's actually my favorite song on the album. It's Inner City Mama. And apparently there's a music video for it, so maybe it was released as a single and I just was never aware of it. Like I don't recall ever hearing this song before. But yeah, I love this song. It has a really cool jazzy arrangement. And the jazzy influence shouldn't be too surprising because her stepdad was Don Cherry. So for my Canadian viewers, not that Don Cherry. It's Don Cherry, the noted jazz trumpeter. And also her half brother was Eagle Eye Cherry, who was a bit of a one-hit wonder with that song Save Tonight. The first 4 songs are the strongest songs on the album, so the album is top heavy, and then it definitely takes a big drop after that. And it's the same issues I already mentioned, just more pronounced. The 80s music arrangement, some lyrics are cringy, and I'm not a big fan of the songs that she raps on. So overall, I was not a big fan of this album, even though she's done some other things that I liked. And there's even an album, like I mentioned, that I like. This album just isn't for me. So yeah, I give it 2.5 stars. So today's randomly generated album is The Wall by Pink Floyd, released in 1979. So, what to say about The Wall? Obviously, a classic, epic album. It was a concept album, a rock opera. And then basically, maybe we'll start a little bit with the concept. So, it was based on a fictional rock star named Pink, who I guess you could say might have had like a bit of like a mental breakdown. He built this metaphorical wall around himself, which basically led to his isolation. So the character of Pig was partly based on Roger Waters' personal experiences, but it was also partly based on Sid Barrett, the original lead singer and main songwriter during the early days of Pink Floyd. So basically, Sid Barrett had mental health issues, and eventually he basically ended up isolating himself. So there's definitely some parallels there as well. So quite often when you're dealing with like rock operas and concept albums, there's always the danger that they potentially could be convoluted. And this teeters on it a little bit, but it's still a bit easier to follow than a lot of the concepts of rock operas. So I think for the most part, it succeeds. And part of the reason why it also succeeds is with rock operas, you can forgive a little bit of convolutedness if the songs are really good. And the songs on this album work really well as standalone songs. So yeah, I mean, obviously, it's probably best to listen to the entire album sequence in order to get the full story because it does work well, obviously, as a cohesive whole, because that's the way it's designed. But there's a number of really strong songs. The other potential issue with rock operas is they can be theatrical. And there are some moments on this, especially towards the end when you get to the trial. But once again, it works because the band's so effective at executing the concept and the songs are so good, you can forgive a little bit of the theatrics. So we'll get a bit more into the actual songs as well. And there's a number of like classic tunes on this album. So of course, one of the centerpieces is Another Brick in the Wall, which has three parts. And basically, each of these songs discuss different metaphorical bricks that Pink uses to construct that metaphorical wall. So the most well-known part of Another Brick in the Wall is, of course, Another Brick in the Wall Part 2. So that's the we don't need no education. We don't need no thought control. No dark sarcasm in the classroom. Teachers, leave your kids alone. Hey, teachers, leave our kids alone. All in all, it's just another brick in the wall. Yeah, I just couldn't help myself. Sorry for the bad singing. So yeah, that's an important song and centerpiece of the album. And there's a number of other classic tunes on there as well. Like obviously Comfortably Numb, absolute classic and works as a standalone song. But also lyrically, it's very chilling as well. Like when individuals, like if you're all going through like a mental health crisis, or maybe not a mental health crisis, another aspect of the album is just being overwhelmed, period. And some of that being overwhelmed could even be by events on both a personal and political level. So, for example, an important aspect of the story, which is based on Roger Waters' personal experience, Roger Waters' dad, and by extension, Pink's father died in World War II. So there's some flashbacks to that in the song. And there is some flashbacks and allusions to the war within the album as well. But yeah, and also this album was recorded around the time of Cold War anxiety. So yeah, when we are overwhelmed with the events around us, either personal or on a more widespread social political level, sometimes we can become comfortably numb and sometimes we even just desensitize ourselves or allow ourselves to be desensitized just as a way of dealing with the pain and anxiety. So yeah, that is a powerful song there. And another song I want to discuss is Muddle. And this is another song that could work both on a personal and socio-political level. Like there's like the reference to Muddle where they dropped the bomb, which once again I already mentioned, like the Cold War anxiety that was relevant at the time that the album was created. So yeah, the that song definitely does express social anxiety, but then also Pink's motto was a controlling smother and motto as well. So it worked in that context. So yeah, a number of these songs, even as standalone tracks, work on multiple levels. For example, this album, it well articulates those that maybe do go through social anxiety or struggle with mental health issues. It's very relatable that way. And there's a number of individuals as a coping mechanism, they build that metaphorical wall. But there's also a number of songs here that I already mentioned as a broader application as well. So even going with the socio-political context of the album, it is interesting that Roger Waters performed a charity concert back in 1990 after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and he performed it in Berlin at a site that was partly occupied by the wall. So the album ended up, even in later years, taking on a bit more of a significance in that context as well. And by extension, you could view this almost as like a protest album. But yeah, even when 2016, with Donald Trump being elected, part of his campaign was building the wall, which even makes this album even a bit more relevant in another context as well. So yeah, it's a powerful album on many different levels. It resonates on a personal level and also on a socio-political level. As I already mentioned, a lot of the songs are just legitimate classics. I already mentioned many of them, but let's just go through some of the other songs there. Okay, In the Flash, there's a couple different versions of it, but that's the song that kind of helps sets the tone throughout the album. Goodbye, Blue Sky, that's a powerful song. Hey, you, anybody out there? Yeah, it's a powerful song. But yeah, like I said, the entire album, there's not too many weaker songs, and even the songs, like I'm not necessarily standalone tracks. I'm not into all the songs towards the end that kind of build around the trial because they're all a bit theatrical. But when you listen it in the context of the entire album, I think the songs are effective in what they are meant to do. So yes, there's a reason why this is considered one of the greatest concept albums of all time and one of the greatest rock operas of all time. Legitimate classic and an absolute easy 5 stars. Today's randomly generated album is Blue by Joni Mitchell, released in 1971. I love me some Joni, and I love this album. And on the surface, it's the type of album that I wouldn't necessarily automatically be into because vibe-wise, it could be a bit sleepy. But it's just that the songs are just so good and powerful. They're very intimate and confessional. And it's the type of album that it's hard to listen to and not feel something. If you don't feel something, you're not human. So yeah, we'll get right into the album. So I love the bookends. It opens with All I Want, which is a very playful tune, and closes with the gorgeous The Last Time I Saw Richard. But the entire album, there's really no fill on the album. So a couple of the other highlights, Carrie's another song that's very playful, the title track, Blue. And then a couple of tracks I want to contrast with each other because they discuss similar themes is California. It was partly written because basically feeling homesick, like she was in Europe at the time, and she kind of missed the creative environment of Los Angeles, so she basically wanted to go back to California, and that's definitely a highlight of the album. But I want to contrast that to Rebel because it also deals with a sense of being homesick and displacement, but kind of on the opposite scale. So in this case, she's in California, but basically the bright lights of Los Angeles and the pressures of being famous, that anxiety is getting to her, and now she longs to go back to Canada. Concerning the Rebel, sometimes it gets lumped into as being a Christmas song because it references taking place during Christmas. But it's really not a Christmas song, or at least not in the festive sense. Like I said, it's really about that sense of displacement. That's something that this album really touches upon. Like it's very confessional. You almost feel dirty listening to the album because it's like you're reading those diary entries. And even many of the songs on the album are dealing with relationships with different real life individuals like James Taylor and Graham Nash. So if you've dated Joni Mitchell at some point, there's a good chance she wrote a song about you. So we mentioned the Rebel, she referenced Canada. She also references Canada in the song A Case of You as well. So that longing, like there was always, even when she ended up moving to the States to become famous, there's always that part of her that has longed to go back home, and Canada was always had a place in her heart. And I think that's also another important aspect of this album. It just highlights that relatable human tendency, regardless of what our circumstances are. We always long for the things we don't have. And sometimes we try to look back on our past circumstances with rose-colored glasses. But the reality is, it doesn't matter where we are in our life. As humans, we're never content. And that's not even a knock against Joni. It's just a human tendency. And that human tendency is part of the reason why Joni Mitchell writes such powerful songs. Such a gorgeous, powerful album. Easy 5 stars. So that concludes the recap. So overall, it was a pretty solid week. And it's probably the strongest week out of the 4 weeks I've done so far because we've had 4 new 5-star albums and only one album was below 4 stars. So maybe now we'll look at the updated ratings. So we'll look at our updated rankings here. So we got new number 1 and 2 with Beck, Odelay, and Joni Mitchell's Blue. And then we got, now, like I mentioned, we have a total of 7 5-star albums. So we also got the White Stripes, Pink Floyd, Bob Dylan, Nick Drake, and Radiohead. And then if we scroll down, you can see the updated list here. And then towards the bottom, our bottom album has stayed the same. King Crimson, Locks, Tongues, and Aspects. But we got a new second to last with Neneh Cherry's Raw Like Sushi. So, of course, the other question we got to ask that we've been asking every week, do these albums belong in the book 1001 You Must Hear before you die? And of course, as I say every week, hyperbole, of course, you cannot listen to any of these albums and live a perfectly happy life. But the question is, are these truly essential albums? I think the only album I might argue this week is Neneh Cherry's, because I think there's other albums within that genre that are probably more influential. But I think for the most part, the albums here, you could make an argument that they deserve inclusion and are worth listening to. And even the Neneh Cherry album, like obviously I didn't fully connect to it. I thought it sounded dated, but I don't think it's totally without merit. Like, for example, there was some trip hop elements, and this was during the early stages of the development of that. But some of the other like hip hop elements fell a bit flat for me, and some of it was like even dated back when it came out. So yeah, I don't think it was necessarily an essential album. So please let me know what you think. So of the 7 albums I reviewed this week, do you agree or disagree with me? Do you think I'm an idiot? Let me know in the comments. Please do so respectfully. Let me know what your favorite album was or the ones I listened to. And you can just basically even mention, if you want, your favorite albums in general, if you're so inclined. And then also, before we conclude, I want to mention one other thing. So lately, for these videos, I've started using Riverside FM to record and edit my videos. And I find that there's a lot of helpful tools, especially in the editing process, that have really made the process go a lot quicker. And the process is now even a lot quicker when it comes to publishing to different social media platforms. That process has been made a lot easier with Riverside as well. Like, for example, in the past, it sometimes would take me hours to upload a video on YouTube, and now it's a matter of seconds. So if you do happen to make content online, and they also have tools for like webinars and podcasts. But yeah, if you're so inclined, you can feel free to check out Riverside FM, and you can start off by testing it for free. And I'll put a link in my description. And then if you want me to keep making content like this, please like and subscribe. And also, before I conclude, we need to do the shameless plug. Check out ongoing history of protestsongs.com. Thanks for watching, and please stay safe.